training, apprenticeship and digital skills programme has reached more than 100,000 people since 2015. So how will the government ensure that this door for young people into the industry isn't slammed shut?
Again, I thank the Honourable Lady for that question. She raises a very important point, and I feel sure that will be at the forefront of the government's considerations when they look at the business case and the implications of Channel 4 privatisation.
Michael Fabricant.
Would my honourable friend take this opportunity to praise the work of the production companies, not only in Cardiff, but Aberystwyth and elsewhere in Wales? But is he aware that some of these companies are actually quite frustrated with Channel 4, feeling they can't get a look in? Some of them would actually welcome a change of management.
I thank him for that question, and that will need to be subject to the review, those considerations. But I think the important thing to emphasise is the long list of productions from Wales that we all know well, and we must see that continue.
William Bragg.
Can I welcome the appointments of my honourable friend, who is surely one of the ablest ministers in his Manchester's government? And has he? I would be interested to know of his recent assessments on the television production industry of Wales and the ever-expanding media city in Greater Manchester.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that question, and he will know much more about that particular issue than I do. But of course, Manchester is near to North Wales, and the success of Manchester influences the media performance within North Wales also.
Deirdre.
For Mr. Speaker.
Well, with your permission, Mr. Speaker, I will answer questions 4 and 14 together. The Bill of Rights will continue to protect the same rights and freedoms currently in place, but will restore a common-sense approach to human rights, safeguarding the public interest and respecting the will of Parliament.
Deirdre Brown.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State previously and then failed to answer the Plaid Cymru leader's question on this, so I'll have another go. The right to self-determination is set out in Article 1 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Will the proposed British Bill of Rights uphold this by enshrining the right of self-determination for the peoples of Wales, Scotland, England and Northern Ireland?
Mr. Speaker, the Bill of Rights is a reserved matter, a matter clearly reserved for the UK government. The UK government will always respect the right of devolved administrations to legislate in areas for which they are responsible, and we would assume that the devolved administrations will respect the right of the UK government to legislate in areas in which it is responsible. That is what respect and self-determination is all about.
Owen Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, again, I don't think that quite got to the point of this, but the Joint Committee on Human Rights have recommended in their report last year that the UK Government should not pursue reform of the Human Rights Act without consent of the Scottish Parliament, Welsh Senate and the Northern Ireland Assembly. And as the UK Government have failed to do so, does the Minister not see the vital need for devolved nations to have a right to self-determination enshrined in law?
Mr. Speaker, I think that the devolved nations such as Wales will be very pleased that my right honourable friend is bringing in a piece of legislation that is going to stop the ridiculous time wasting where people can take endless appeals at public expense into the courts to challenge judicial decisions. Mr. Speaker, what the Bill of Rights isn't going to do is take away fundamental freedoms such as the right to wear the suffragette colours in the national parliament, something that I'd like members of that particular party to support in their own chamber.
Oliver Hill.
Does my right honourable friend agree with me that the Bill of Rights places at the top of the decision-making tree for rights the Supreme Court? And so does our constitutional settlement as regards the devolved nations. So does he agree with me that it's the Supreme Court that we would look to for correct, rightful decisions in this area, as we've just seen in another context?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would agree with the honourable gentleman, and I certainly think it's incumbent on all of us in this chamber to support decisions of the court, as I'm sure all of us do.
We now come to Philip Oliver.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I was delighted to hear the first shipment of British lamb left from Wales to the USA last month. The USA lamb market is estimated to be worth £37 million over the next 5 years, with over 300 million consumers who can now access and enjoy our world-renowned Welsh lamb.
Mr Speaker, it's great that Welsh lamb has now been exported to the United States for the first time in 20 years. The National Farmers Union has set out a detailed strategy outlining its ambition to grow the UK's food, drink and agricultural exports by 30% by 2030. Will the Minister work with the NFU to realise this laudable ambition to drive the total value of British agri-food exports to over £30 billion by that date?
Well, I certainly will, and I look forward to attending the Royal Welsh Winter Fair next week when I'll be meeting the NFU. Wales has a major role in achieving increased exports, and when it comes to lamb, of course, trade deals with the Gulf Cooperation Council, among others, could be key.
Shadow Minister Gerald Jones.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I too welcome the Minister to his new role. The Minister would know how important lamb exports are to Welsh farmers and the Welsh economy. Exports to the US are indeed a drop in the ocean compared to the damage his government has done with the Australian and New Zealand trade deals. We know his colleague, the member for Camborne and Redruth, said, "I no longer have to put a gloss on what was agreed. Australia was not actually a very good deal. We did not need to give Australia or New Zealand full liberation on beef or sheep. It was not in our economic interest to do so." So, will the Minister now admit his government has sold out Welsh farmers, hasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think he'll recognise that we import more from Ireland than from Australia, and in actual fact, if you look at Australia and New Zealand, their markets are very much in Southeast Asia in terms of rapidly expanding markets. So we need to look at the pros and cons of trade deals, and there are certainly many pros to the trade deals for the British economy.
Tonya Antoniazzi.
Question number 7, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Wales plays a critical role with 2 of the UK's 3 liquefied natural gas terminals supplying gas through Pembrokeshire to the grid. Wales is well placed to build on this record, with prime sites for new nuclear projects in North Wales and floating offshore wind in the Celtic Sea. We will continue to champion these opportunities across government.
Tonya Antoniazzi.
Mr Speaker, off-grid households in Wales, including many of them in my constituency, are still waiting for the announcement on how they will receive support with their rising costs. The ongoing cost of living crisis is not the only issue. People who rely on off-grid energy are hostages to what has become an increasingly unstable market, and it's only set to get worse. And look, Mr Speaker, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, does the Minister believe it's finally, where the previous government has failed, is it finally time for this government to back new renewable energy like the Swansea Council's Blue Eden Lagoon project and get a grip of a tidal lagoon in Swansea?
Thank the Honourable Lady for that question, and I'd be interested to read more about the Blue Eden project. I understand it has had community renewal funding to look at the prospect for that to progress, and I will certainly follow it with great interest.
We now come to Chair of the Select Committee, Stephen Crowell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. At the Welsh Affairs Select Committee this morning, we've been hearing from the Energy Minister on the enormous potential of floating offshore wind to contribute to UK energy security. On a day when Port Talbot and Milford Haven are launching their joint Freeport bid to deliver this new industry, can I really urge my honourable friend to throw his weight behind unleashing the potential of floating offshore wind in the Celtic Sea?
Well, I thank my right honourable friend, and actually had a meeting only yesterday with a developer that is interested in floating offshore wind. It has the potential to contribute massively to the renewable energy requirements that this country requires, and of course South West Wales is absolutely key to that.
Alan Harris.
Question 8, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, I have frequent discussions with my ministerial colleagues on a range of matters, including the cost of living. And this year I'm very pleased to say that as a result of the autumn statements, this government will be spending £55 billion to help households and businesses with their energy bills. And we've also announced further support for 2023-24, so that the most vulnerable households will continue to be supported.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Swansea East-based charity Faith in Family support 500 households a week who are struggling to pay for food, energy and living costs. Currently, they raise the money to provide vouchers for toys so that children will be able to open a gift on Christmas morning. The Everyone Deserves a Christmas campaign, also based in Swansea, are desperately trying to raise funds to provide festive hampers for these families. Community organisations are doing their bit to ensure that nobody goes without this Christmas. What's the government going to do?
Well, firstly, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to commend the Honourable Lady for her support for the hamper campaign, and I believe that my own office in the past, possibly as part of the same campaign which she's championed, have sent hampers out, and I'm sure other members may want to do so. As far as the wider issue, of course, we all accept that a Christmas hamper isn't going to solve economic problems. So what I'd do is refer the Honourable Lady back to the answer I gave earlier, which is that this government have absolutely done everything possible to target help at the least well-off in society. That's why, in addition to the inflation-linked increases to pensions and to benefits and to the living wage, the government have also made sure that those on benefits will receive a payment of £900, pensioners getting £300, households where there are people with disabilities £150. And we are very proud of our record in doing our best for those with the least.
Speaker, and can I welcome my right honourable friend to his position? My right honourable friend just highlighted the range of generous support that's been made available to households facing the energy crisis. But Park Home residents are still waiting for clarification in terms of how they will receive their support. The government has clearly made strong, warm commitments to Park Home residents. When does he think the government will be in a position to explain technically how money will be made to those households?
Mr. Speaker, I thank the right honourable gentleman for his kind words, and I know that he's raised this issue on a number of occasions. I am told that there are going to be details forthcoming imminently on that particular point, and I'm sure that other colleagues who are more directly involved in this have heard the honourable gentleman's question and will be responding to him very shortly.
Sir Tony Lloyd.
Benign, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I have regular discussions with Cabinet colleagues on a wide range of transport measures, including HS2. HS2 will enable quicker and more frequent train services to North Wales via the Crewe Northern Connection and will improve connections from North Wales to the HS2 network, potentially bringing passengers within 2 hours and 15 minutes of London.
Sir Tony Lloyd.
Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State must recognise, though, that North Wales in particular can only obtain the benefit of HS2 with proper connectivity, and that means electrification of the North Wales line. Will he guarantee that that will take place, or if not, will he accept that's a betrayal of the interests of the people of North Wales?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't necessarily think it would require electrification of the North Wales line. With respect, there are proposals at the moment to make improvements to the North Wales line, which would be more based around changes to signalling, which will allow more trains to run on the track. I don't pretend to be a rail engineer, but the proposal I've seen do not include electrification, but would increase journey times across the North Wales line, and therefore feeding into Crewe would increase journey times between North Wales and London and bring benefits to all passengers.
Sir Villiers. Teresa Villiers.
Question number 10, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Right Honourable Member has long championed a deposit return scheme since her time as Secretary of State for DEFRA. DEFRA regularly discussed coordination of the implementation of the scheme with the Welsh Government, and it was an agenda item at the recent Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Interministerial Group, which I attended.
Teresa Villiers.
This is a really important scheme. It will help tackle plastic waste and litter. People want it to be introduced. It'll be much more successful if it's coordinated between Cardiff, Edinburgh and London. Please, from the government, make progress on delivering it right across the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
Well, I couldn't agree more. Non-aligned deposit return schemes across the UK risk creating barriers to trade, breaking up supply chains, increasing costs to business and reducing the choice and availability of products in Wales. And in recent days I've met the Society of Independent Brewers, British Glass, the Wine and Spirit Trade Association and UK Hospitality to discuss these issues, and I'll be doing all I can to encourage UK-wide coordination.
Virginia Crosby.
Question 11, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I met with officials from the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities last week to discuss this very subject. And I feel confident that there are going to be several high-quality bids from Wales. The bidding process closes tomorrow at 6 p.m, and I look forward to the announcement being made early in 2023.
Virginia Crosby.
Croeso, may I welcome the Secretary of State to his place, and would the Secretary of State join me in thanking all those that support Anglesey's bid to become a free port, and does he agree that a free port in Wales delivers on our Conservative manifesto commitment and will strengthen Wales's bond with the UK government and our important union?
Mr. Speaker, I'm absolutely delighted to agree with the Honourable Lady, and indeed to thank all those who've been involved in Freeport bids across the whole of Wales. Freeports have the potential to spread wealth across the areas in which they're established. They deliver on the government's commitment to level up, and they're an example of the benefits of Wales to being a part of the Union. So I'd like to congratulate my right honourable friend, the Honourable Lady, who has spoken on this issue on 26 occasions. I look forward to that announcement being made in February.
Paul Williams.
Speaker, we have seen many claims about the number of jobs that will be created in Holyhead. Can the Secretary of State give me a precise assessment, or even a wild guess, as to how many jobs will be created, how many of them will be new, and how many will be merely transferred from other areas?
Mr. Speaker, I have certain powers as Secretary of State, but the powers of absolute clairvoyance are not amongst them, and therefore I find it rather difficult to give an exact figure of the number of jobs that would be created as a result of any one of the many projects the government are doing to level up across the United Kingdom. But what I can tell him is that where free ports have been trialled in Humber and Teesside, they have created thousands of new jobs, and I look forward to seeing something similar happen no matter where a free port is established in Wales.
Simon Baines.
Question number 12, please, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, as a keen sportsman, I was absolutely delighted to visit the new 3G pitch at Bagland Field, which received funds from the UK government's multi-sport grassroots facilities programme, which my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, championed when he was Chancellor. I look forward to meeting with Welsh Government ministers next week to discuss this and other issues around sports as we cheer on our heroes in Team Cymru ar y wal goch.
Simon Baines.
Speaker. UK government funding for grassroots football facilities in Clwyd South this year has included £57,000 for upgrading the pitch at Ascol y Grango for the community hub, and £20,000 for Pennachi Football Club, which is helping re-establish a girls' team. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that grassroots sport is vital for the health, well-being and quality of life of all our communities?
Mr. Speaker, I would absolutely agree with my honourable friend, and that is why we have allocated £1.3 million to 17 projects in Wales to make the vital improvements to the changing room facilities and the artificial grass surfaces. Mr. Speaker, sports clubs are at the heart of every community in Wales, and Wales is at the heart of every community, of every decision taken by this government and this Prime Minister.
Damien Griffith.
Indeed, Mr. Speaker. Well, as people up and down Wales celebrate Wales's success and wish them the best for the next couple of matches, this is an ideal and unparalleled opportunity to galvanise that enthusiasm and develop the grassroots football in Wales. The Football Association of Wales tell me that £12 million has been earmarked by DCMS for the development of the sport over the next few years, but could be threatened by the cuts announced by the Chancellor last week. So will the Secretary of State please now speak to the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport and beg her to safeguard that money for the development of grassroots football in Wales?
Mr. Speaker, this government have already shown their commitment to sport, not just to football but many other sports as well, through the funds that have been dispersed by DCMS across the United Kingdom. I'm sure other right honourable colleagues will have heard the comments made by the Honourable Lady, but I can assure her of our commitment to grassroots sports across Wales and the United Kingdom, and I look forward to joining her to support Team Cymru ar wal goch wythnos nesaf. Diolch.
That completes Welsh questions. Before we come to the Prime Minister's questions, I'd like to point out that the British Sign Language interpretations of proceedings is available to watch on Parliament Live TV. We now come to questions to Prime Minister Jonathan Gullis.
Number one, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know that members across the House will want to join me in wishing both England and Wales the best of luck for the World Cup. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others in addition to my duties in this House. I shall have further such meetings later today.
Jonathan Gullis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. People in places like Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Tork aren't getting the help they need quickly enough when it comes to mental health. Fellow campaigner James Starkey and I were delighted when the Prime Minister, who was then Chancellor, said he would back our campaign every step of the way to get mental health nurses into GP surgeries. So will the Prime Minister deliver on his promise, back our No Time to Wait pilot scheme developed by the Royal College of Nursing and help get people the support they need?
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I thank my honourable friend for his continued campaigning on this important issue. I'm pleased to tell him all 1,250 primary care networks in England are entitled to recruit up to 2 mental health practitioners to work in surgeries. I know the BMA and NHS are looking at expanding that, and I look forward to working with him to ensure that his constituents in Stoke get the mental health support and care that they need.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and congratulations to England and Wales on their start to the World Cup, and good luck for the rest of the tournament. Mr. Speaker, the World Cup doesn't belong to FIFA, and it doesn't belong to the host nation. It belongs to everyone who loves football. It's totally unacceptable that during this tournament, gay football fans are unable to acknowledge who they love, and players have been threatened with suspension if they show solidarity with those fans. Shame on FIFA. Britain faces the lowest growth of any OECD nation over the next 2 years. Why?
Mr. Speaker, this country has experienced since 2010 the 3rd highest growth in the G7. This year, the fastest growth in the G7, and unemployment at a multi-decade low. We're getting on to deliver more growth, Mr. Speaker. We're delivering free ports. We're investing in apprenticeships. We're protecting R&D. And if the Labour Party is serious about actually supporting growth, maybe they should get on the phone with their union paymasters and tell them to call off the strikes.
Mr. Speaker,
Order. We want to get through Prime Minister's questions, and you're not helping me. Keir Starmer.
He's in total denial. We're bottom of the 38 OECD countries who are all in the same boat when it comes to COVID and Ukraine. And he wants a pat on the back. It's like a football manager, bottom of the league at Christmas, celebrating an away draw 3 months ago, and it won't wash. So they don't like their record, that's the problem. So let's try it another way. Why is Britain set to be the first country into recession and the last country out?
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased that the Right Honourable Gentleman brought up the OECD report, because it contained actually 3 very important points. Firstly, it made the point that actually in the years following the pandemic, we're projected to have almost the highest growth amongst our peer countries. It also made the point, it was crystal clear that the challenges we face are completely international in nature. And thirdly, Mr. Speaker, it supported our fiscal plan because it's credible and ensures sustainability. Now, the Right Honourable Gentleman would have known all of that if he actually read the whole report. But he's not interested in substance. He's an opportunist, Mr. Speaker. In 4 weeks, Mr. Speaker, in 4 weeks, I've strengthened the economy. We've put more money into the NHS and schools. We've delivered a deal to tackle illegal migration. In the same 4 weeks, all we've...
Prime Minister, when I stand, you've got to sit down. But can I just say to you, you came to me quite rightly and said to me, we want to get through Prime Minister's questions. I'm going to give short answers. Please stick to what you have. Well,
Mr. Speaker, there's only one party that's crashed the economy, and they're sitting there. And I notice this, Mr. Speaker. I notice this. He won't say why Britain is set to be the first into a recession and the last out. So I will. 12 years of Tory failure, followed by 12 weeks of Tory chaos. For a decade, they've let our economy drift aimlessly before suddenly cutting the parachute ropes and slamming it to the ground. And because of the changes he's made, a typical household will end up with tax increases of £1,400. They don't want to hear about these tax increases of £1,400. Contrast that to a super wealthy non-dom living here but holding their income overseas. How much more?
Order. Mr. Young, I don't need any more. I don't need shouting, don't need pointing. You're meant to be a good example when you sit on this front bench. Because you're the second, don't spoil what you're meant to do.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think they want to hear this. Because of the changes he's made, a typical household will end up paying tax increases of £1,400. Contrast that to a super wealthy non-dom living here but holding their income overseas. How much more has he asked them to pay?
Just order. As I said to the Prime Minister, I said to the Leader of the Opposition, I've got to get through this list. I need you both to help me and think of other members. Come on.
Well, Mr. Speaker, Labour had 13 years to address this issue and did nothing. Nothing. It was the Conservative government that took action and tightened the rules. But the problem with his idea is that it would end up costing Britain money. Not my words, the words of the former Labour Shadow Chancellor. But rather than peddling fairy tales and gesture politics, let's actually tell him what we're doing to deliver for this country. A record increase in the national living wage, protecting millions from energy bills, protecting the pensioners' triple lock. That's what we're doing for this country.
Mr. Speaker, if they'd grown the economy at the same rate as the last Labour government, we'd have tens of billions of pounds more to spend on that. Mr. Speaker, it wasn't a trick question. The answer is he's not asked non-doms to pay a penny more. Every year, he talks about the money. Every year, that's £3.6 billion thrown away because he won't make them pay their taxes here. How many extra doctors could Britain afford with that money?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased that he brought up doctors, because last week we delivered record increases in funding for the NHS. Not just more doctors, but more nurses, more scans, more operations. That shows our commitment to prioritise the NHS. Not my words, the words of the NHS Chief Executive.
Scrapping the non-dom status would allow us to train 15,000 doctors every year. That's what Labour would do. And we can carry on handing out tax breaks to the super rich. Or we can live in a society where people don't have to go private to get a doctor's appointment. It's that simple. He also hands Shell 90p for every £1 they spend drilling. So they haven't paid a penny in windfall tax. Mr. Speaker, you may have seen this week that somebody shredded £10,000 in protest at those propping up an oil and gas giant. But he shreds £10,000 every other minute propping them up. Which does he think is the more absurd?
Mr. Speaker, this is the government that has actually put in place an economic plan that will deliver confidence and stability to our economy. And all I've heard from the Honourable Gentleman today, there's no answers, there's no substance, because there's no plan, Mr. Speaker. He talks about the NHS, we're delivering record funding for the NHS, but we can only do that on the foundations of a strong economy. You can't deliver for the NHS unless you have a plan for the economy, and he doesn't have either, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, every time he opens his mouth, another powerful business voice says he hasn't got a plan on growth. The failure of the last 12 years and the chaos of the last 12 weeks are compounded by the decisions he's taking now. He won't follow Labour's plan to scrap non-dom status. Instead, we've got an NHS staffing crisis. He won't follow Labour's plan to make oil and gas giants pay their fair share. Instead, he hammers working people. And he won't push through planning reform. Instead, he kills off the dream of home ownership. Too weak to take on his party, too weak to take on vested interest. 12 long years of Tory government, 5 Prime Ministers, 7 Chancellors. Why do they always clobber working people?
Mr. Speaker, he talks about leadership. This summer, I stood on my principles and told the country what they needed to hear, even though it was difficult. When he ran for leader, he told his party what they wanted to hear. And even now, he says one thing and he does the other. He says he cares for working people, but he won't stand up to the unions. He said he'd honour Brexit, but he tried to have a second referendum. And now he tries to talk tough about immigration, but he promised to defend free movement. You can trust him to deliver for his party. You can trust me to deliver for the country.
Ruth Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we debate how to best help our constituents with their energy costs, 10 million people in Ukraine are without power due to Russia's barbaric strikes on the country's energy infrastructure. So can my right honourable friend set out what support we will be providing to our Ukrainian allies to help them repair the damage and keep their citizens warm this winter?
I'm pleased to tell my honourable friend that I spent time discussing this with President Zelensky at the weekend and talking to Ukrainian families about the impact these awful strikes are having on them. I know the whole House will be proud to know that we're providing millions of pounds of immediate support with generators, shelter and water repairs on top of the 570 mobile power generation that we are donating to power facilities across Ukraine. We're also working with the government to repair critical infrastructure with 8 projects identified by UK Export Finance to be delivered in the near future.
We now come to the Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the whole House will want to join me in welcoming the moderator of the Church of Scotland to our proceedings this afternoon and to thank him for his sermon at St Margaret's this morning. Mr. Speaker, this morning the Supreme Court clarified a point of law, but the very point of democracy in this union is now at stake, and democracy will not be denied. Because whether Westminster likes it or not, last year the people of Scotland voted for a Scottish Parliament with a majority and the mandate to deliver an independence referendum. The Prime Minister has every right to oppose independence. He has no right to deny democracy to the people of Scotland. If the Prime Minister keeps blocking that referendum, will he at least be honest and confirm that the very idea that the United Kingdom is a voluntary union of nations is now dead and buried?
Well, Mr. Speaker, let me start by saying we respect the clear and definitive ruling of the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom. And what I would say to the honourable gentleman, that firstly, I am looking forward to also seeing the moderator of Scotland tomorrow. And I think that the people of Scotland want us to be working on fixing the major challenges that we collectively face, whether that's the economy, supporting the NHS, or indeed supporting Ukraine. Now is the time for politicians to work together, and that's what this government will do.
Ian Blackford.
Mr. Speaker, it is right that we respect the decision of the court. But the Prime Minister can't claim to respect the rule of law and then deny democracy in the very same breath. If democracy is to matter, if elections matter, then mandates matter. Since 2014, the Scottish National Party has won 8 elections in a row. Last year, we won a landslide. The Scottish Parliament now has the biggest majority for an independence referendum in the history of devolution. The Prime Minister doesn't even have a personal mandate to sit in 10 Downing Street. What right does a man with no mandate have to deny Scottish democracy?
But, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to Scottish democracy, I'm pleased that the Scottish Government has one of the most powerful devolved assemblies anywhere in the world. And I'm pleased, and I was pleased very shortly after becoming Prime Minister to be the first Prime Minister in over a decade to attend the Council, to sit down with the First Minister, to explore ways in which we can work together with the Scottish Government to deliver for the people of Scotland. Whether that's delivering our growth deals, delivering free ports, or ensuring that the £1.5 billion of extra Barnet money can go towards supporting public services, that's what we're committed to doing in Scotland.
Gareth Johnson.
Mr. Speaker, last month, Just Stop Oil clambered up the Dartford crossing, causing chaos for days. They then attacked artworks, the M25, and anything else to cause misery and mayhem. These people are not protesters, they are criminals. Will the Prime Minister therefore consider making Just Stop Oil a prescribed organisation so that they can be treated as the criminal organisation they actually are?
Mr. Speaker, the kind of demonstrations we've seen recently disrupt people's daily lives, they cause mass misery for the public, and they put people in danger. The police have our full support in their efforts to minimise this disruption and tackle reckless and illegal activity. The Public Order Bill will give them the powers they need, and I look forward to seeing the support that that bill receives from every part of this House.
Ed Davey.
Mr. Speaker, one of my constituents, Vanessa, has contacted me in floods of tears. Her mortgage payments have risen by £500 a month. She and her husband were already struggling with high energy bills and high food bills. Now, like 1 in 4 across the country, they fear losing their home. We are out of options and heartbroken, says Vanessa. So will the Prime Minister introduce a new mortgage protection fund paid for by reversing his tax cuts to the banks? Will he help Vanessa keep her home?
Mr. Speaker, I'm deeply sorry to hear about Vanessa's circumstances, and I want her to know that the plan that the Chancellor announced last week will help families like hers up and down the country, because it's the right plan to tackle inflation, to limit the increase in mortgage rates and ensure confidence in our economy. There is specific help that the Chancellor announced, offering low-interest loans to those owners on benefits to cover interest on mortgages of up to $250,000. The Chancellor is also meeting with mortgage lenders in the coming weeks, and we will continue to do all we can to support those homeowners who are struggling with their payments.
Greg Tracy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recently took part in the Pitching In campaign, which promotes grassroots sports and also celebrates the volunteers who make it possible every week. So would the Prime Minister join me in thanking those volunteers for the incredible work they do? And also, with top-flight football taking a bit of a break at the moment because of the World Cup, would he join me in reminding people that it's the perfect opportunity to go out and support their local non-league football teams who are incredibly welcoming, and including in that, of course, Atherstone Town Community Football Club, Bedworth United and Coleshill Town in my constituency.
Well, I'm happy to join my honourable friend in praising all his local teams, and he makes an excellent point, actually, that volunteers have a vital role to play in community sport and actually the delivery of major events, and I join him in thanking them for everything that they do. Sport accounts for over half, Mr. Speaker, of volunteering in the UK, and every one volunteer generates a capacity for at least 8 more people to participate in sport, and I know the whole House will join me in praising their efforts.
Alan Dorrance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon. Mr. Speaker, since 2014, the SNP have won 8 elections, and we now have more councillors, members of the Scottish Parliament and more MPs in this place than any other Scottish political party. Every one of those elected members were elected on a manifesto and clear mandate for Scottish independence. Mr Speaker, what democratic right does this government have to deny Scottish democracy, refuse an independence referendum, and to keep us shackled and imprisoned in this involuntary and unequal union against the will of the Scottish people?
Well, Mr Speaker, again, we respect the decision of the court today with regard to the referendum, and we're getting on with the business of working constructively, collaboratively, in partnership with the Scottish Government to deliver for his constituents. Indeed, the Ayrshire Growth Deal is investing over £100 million to make use of his region's strong industrial heritage, potentially making more use of renewable energy. That's the kind of positive project we should be focused on, and that's what we'll keep on delivering.
John Penrose.
Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister has rightly promised to recruit a successor to Lord Geit as his ethics adviser promptly. But would he accept that threats to integrity are often broader than the job description of the Prime Minister's adviser on the Ministerial Code? And will he therefore commit to introduce the additional measures in the new 5-point integrity plan on topics like lobbying and conflicts of interest, developed with organisations like Transparency International and Spotlight on Corruption, to show he will walk the talk and put party integrity and government integrity at the heart of our democracy?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his comprehensive and thoughtful suggestions. As he acknowledged, he knows that I've committed to appointing an independent adviser on ministerial interests, and I very much look forward to studying his other proposals in proper time.
Chris Law.
Mr Speaker, just 3 months ago, this appointed interim Prime Minister said in Scotland, and I quote, "We live in a union, which is of course there by consent and by democracy." And added, "I accept that." Well, Mr Speaker, by their consent and by democracy, the Scottish people have already voted by a clear majority in the Scottish Parliament to have their say through a referendum on the independent future for Scotland. So it begs the ultimate question, Mr Speaker. Can this Prime Minister tell us if he accepts Scottish democracy? And if so, how that's compatible with today's Supreme Court ruling that clearly exposes the myth that the UK is a voluntary union and is upheld by consent?
Mr Speaker, at a time like this, the Scottish people want to see their governments working together on the things that matter to them, and I believe that that is possible. And actually, he should know this, Mr Speaker. In his own constituency, we've been able to support culture and tourism, working together to bring the V&A to Dundee. That's an example of a positive project. It demonstrates the benefits of the union, and that's what we'll keep on delivering.
Sir Paul Beresford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My right honourable friend will be aware that the government provides a slim financial support across 5 firms for small modular reactors. A few other countries have woken up and are seriously investing in SMRs. As Sizewell will not be running until 2031 at the earliest, should we not be doing the same?
No, my honourable friend actually makes an excellent point, and hopefully he was heartened to hear what the Chancellor said last week, that we want to crack on with our overall nuclear programme. And I think he's right to acknowledge that small and advanced nuclear reactors have the potential to play a key role in that nuclear programme alongside projects like Hinkley and Sizewell. That's why we've allocated £385 million to support them, and like him, I'm keen to see progress as soon as possible.
Dr Philippa Whitford.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. During the 2014 referendum, we were told that Scotland was an equal partner in a family of nations. Yet the disaster that is Brexit was forced on Scotland against our will, and we see devolution wound back by legislation such as the Internal Market Act. So if the Prime Minister still claims the UK is a voluntary union, can he explain the democratic route by which the people of Scotland get to make a choice over their own future?
Well, Mr Speaker, the UK is a collaborative and constructive union that is delivering for the people of Scotland. Even in Ayrshire itself, where we're working collaboratively with the Scottish Government to invest in aerospace, advanced manufacturing and space. Those are the types of activities that will bring tangible benefit to the people in her region, and that's the right focus for the Government.
Angela Adams.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As a North Yorkshire MP, my right honourable friend will know how crucial bus services are to our communities. Last month, Arriva stopped the only bus between Selby and Doncaster meaning that 40 Selby College students had to find, at very short notice, alternative transport to get to college. Thankfully, the college itself stepped in to resolve the situation. Additionally, across North Yorkshire, around 80 other bus services are now under threat. Can he advise what action he will take to ensure that essential services are not withdrawn at short notice and ensure that these are continued to be operated across Selby District and wider North Yorkshire?
My right honourable friend is absolutely right, and he knows that I share exactly the same challenges that he faced in our rural areas of making sure that our constituents have access to the bus services they need. I'm pleased that the Chancellor's allocated funding for extra bus services across the country, and I look forward to working with him to ensure that that money finds its way to rural areas like North Yorkshire to provide the connectivity that's so important for people to have opportunity and get access to public services.
Olivia Blake.
May I refer the House to my register of interests? Mr. Speaker, tomorrow marks 1 year since 32 people lost their lives in the Channel. New evidence suggests that the boat reached British waters and that the French and British authorities knew that it was in distress for a very long time. Families are still waiting for answers from the Marine Accident Investigation. Why has this investigation taken so long? Will he commit to a full public inquiry afterwards? And does he concede that this would not have happened if there were safe and legal routes into the UK?
Well, Mr. Speaker, every life that is lost in the Channel is a tragedy, but that is why it is so vital that we break the cycle of criminal gangs that are exploiting people and trafficking them, and that's what the Home Secretary is focused on. We have accepted over 380,000 people over the past few years because this is a place where people can seek refuge and sanctuary, but we must be able to do that in a sustainable way, and that's why it's right that we tackle illegal migration.
Dr. Caroline Johnson.
Mr. Speaker, rising energy bills are a challenge for all of us, and constituents in Sleaford and North Hykeham are very grateful for much of the support that has been given by government. But with temperatures this week falling below freezing in Lincolnshire, those living in park homes are particularly concerned when they will receive their support. So I ask my honourable friend the Prime Minister, can he tell me when and how people living in park homes will receive the £400 which they're entitled to?
And my honourable friend has consistently and rightly championed her rural constituents, making sure that they get access to the energy support that we're providing. It's something that the Chancellor prioritised in last week's autumn statement. I will ensure that we get the money out as quickly as possible. She should also be reassured that the cold weather payment system provides extra financial support to those vulnerable constituents when temperatures drop below a certain point.
Callaghan.
Mr. Speaker, did Scotland vote for Brexit? No. Did Scotland vote for austerity?
No.
Did Scotland vote for the Tories?
No.
What we did vote for, don't shout me down, don't shout me down, I've listened to all of you. What we did vote for only last year was the right to choose our own future. With that in mind, and given a previous non-answer from the Prime Minister, can the Prime Minister tell this House, tell us all in fact, how a nation can leave this so-called voluntary union?
Mr. Speaker, the challenges that we face right now are those that require cooperation between our governments, tackling the economy, supporting the NHS, and I'm pleased that last week's autumn statement means that the Scottish Government will receive £1.5 billion in extra funding to deliver for public services in Scotland, and that's what we will continue doing.
Theresa May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Scotland is a proud nation with a unique heritage. It is a valued member of our family of nations, a union of people bound through the generations by shared interests. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that this morning's Supreme Court decision gives the Scottish nationalists, the SNP, the opportunity for once to put the people of Scotland first? And end its obsession with breaking us apart.
I think that my right honourable friend put it very well, Mr. Speaker.
Angus Brendan McNeill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister won't answer, but it's obvious that the route to Scottish independence is now elections, and we know, Prime Minister, there's going to be many of them. Now, Mr. Speaker, inequality cost, and in France, the middle earners earn 20% more than in the UK, and low earners earn 25% more. This inequality is why the cost of energy and the cost of living hits people worse in the UK, and it's why I'm for independence, incidentally, to choose a better path. But meantime, in my constituency, there are both more off-grid fuel customers and a higher rate of fuel poverty than in Northern Ireland. So will the PM do the right thing and extend the £200 payment that's going to Northern Ireland to the off-grid customers in my geographically distinct constituency, the Hebrides, on the basis of fairness? Yes or no?
Mr. Speaker, last week's autumn statement announced £55 billion to support families and businesses across the United Kingdom with their energy bills. And the Chancellor paid particular attention to those that are off-grid in rural areas by doubling the support to £200 for them, and that will help many people in his constituency and across the United Kingdom.
Sarah Brickley.
Speaker, I'm sure we'll both be celebrating this weekend what we consider to be one of the best days of the year, and that is Lancashire Day. Thank you personally for hosting the event in Parliament. So will the Prime Minister, though he represents a Yorkshire constituency, join me in welcoming our Lancastrian local leaders and businesses to Parliament today, and join us in supporting our proud history and bright future by levelling up what we consider to be the best county?
May I offer my best wishes to my honourable friend, and indeed to you, Mr. Speaker, for Lancashire Day. And I can put local rivalry aside on this occasion to join her in thanking Lancastrians for their contribution to our country and to wish her the very best for today's event.
Mr. Oswald.
Mr. Speaker, what we've heard from the Prime Minister today is, in essence, that no matter how Scotland votes, Westminster will decide.
Yep.
But democracy demands differently to that. Mr. Speaker, the late Canon Kenyon Wright said, what if that other voice we know so well says, we say no and we are the state? Well, we say yes and we are the people. And it is the people in Scotland who have to be heard. This place can't stand in the way of democracy. And if this Prime Minister with no mandate thinks it can, is he seriously telling us that this is a voluntary union of equals?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we are focused not on the SNP, but on the people of Scotland. That's who we're delivering for. I'm happy to meet with the First Minister, as I continue to do, to deliver for them, whether it's in her own constituency with a growth deal, whether it's moving civil service jobs to Scotland, whether it's delivering free ports or indeed the extra funding for public services. This is a government that will deliver for the people of Scotland, and we will do it constructively and collaboratively.
Order, order. I would now like to make a statement. On the 20th of October, the Culture, Media, Sport Committee published a special report on answers given to it by the Right Honourable Member for Mid-Bedfordshire when she was the Secretary of State for DCMS. The Honourable Member for Ochil, South and Perthshire subsequently wrote to me asking for precedence for a complaint of a breach of privilege, as was his right. I declined to do so since the bar for such a complaint is high. The House should only take action when essential in order to provide reasonable protection for the House, its members or its officers from improper obstruction. I note the committee itself, of which the honourable gentleman is a member, has said, had Miss Doris remained the Secretary of State, driving policy of selling the channel, we may have sought referral to the Privilege Committee. But as her claims have not been inhibited, the work of the committee, and she is no longer as a position of power over the future of Channel 4, we are instead publishing this report to enable the House and its members to draw its own conclusion. So I consider it appropriate to respect the committee's assessment of the situation. Correspondence on matters of privilege is private. Indeed, had to go to great lengths to ensure that members can write to me in confidence on any matter, knowing their communication will remain private. Expect the same courtesy in my replies. The Honourable Member has seen fit to give a partial and biased account of my letter on Twitter, and I await his apology, I gave the honourable member notice that I would be raising this matter at this time. But I do stress it is not the way we should be doing business in this House. Honourable member for Killen-Pershing.
Mr. Speaker, as you've
the floor.
Mr. Speaker, as you've just explained, the Commons Culture Committee, in which I sit, published a unanimous cross-party report about the testimony of the Right Honourable Member and the testimony she gave to the committee, and there are now considerable public interest in what should happen next. I want to put on record, Mr. Speaker, that I deplore social media pylons against you or indeed anyone else. I've been on the receiving end of them, and they are exceedingly unpleasant. But could I ask for guidance on what I and other members should tell their constituents about integrity in politics in this context? If someone misleads a committee, what should happen next?
Can I just say, integrity is that, first of all, the Clinton letter, but only half the letter, is not integrity. In fact, far from it. It misled the people of this country. It certainly put me in bad light with the people of this country, and I don't expect that to happen in an impartial speaker. So if that was an apology, I don't think it was very good. David Davis.
Mr. Speaker, in following on from that, honourable members of this House have certain strict duties on them. First, there is a duty of upholding the institutions of this House. Clearly, in breaching the confidentiality of the Speaker's private correspondence, the member for Oakle and South Perthshire has knowingly broken that rule. And frankly, for that, if that was an apology, that was not sufficient for that alone. But we also have a duty to tell the truth. Now, in his public pronouncements, he implicitly criticised you, Mr. Speaker, for not referring the DCMS Secretary of State to the Privileges Committee. But you were simply following the convention of agreeing with the DCMS Select Committee, of which he is a member. And when they decided not to refer, there was no minority report from him. There was not even a vote against from him. It was a unanimous vote. So what he was trying to do, Mr. Speaker, was to blame you by his partial release of his letter, and he was leading the public to believe that somehow you made this decision against the wishes of the committee. The rules of this House do not allow me to assert whether I view the misleading of the public as deliberate. So the House can make its own judgment on that. But this miserable half apology was completely inadequate for the breach of this measure.
I'm going to leave it there for today, and I hope the Honourable will reconsider the way he's put his own part. Now I come to the urgent question. I'm going to let members leave before I call. We now come to the urgent question. If members can leave quietly, I want to call the Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To ask the Prime Minister to make a statement on the decision of the Supreme Court and the rights of the Scottish Parliament to call for an independence referendum.
No. Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Member for providing me with the opportunity to address the House on this important ruling of the Supreme Court on the issue of the competence of the Scottish Parliament to legislate for a referendum on independence. The UK Supreme Court has today determined that it is outside the powers of the Scottish Parliament to hold an independence referendum. And I respect the Court's clear and definitive ruling on this matter. The Scottish Government's Lord Advocate referred this question to the Supreme Court, which has today given its judgment. And, Mr. Speaker, the UK Government's position has always been clear that it would be outside the Scottish Parliament's competence to legislate for a referendum on Scottish independence because it is a matter wholly reserved to the United Kingdom Parliament. We welcome the Court's unanimous and unequivocal ruling, which supports the United Kingdom's Government's long-standing position on this matter. People want to see the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish Government focus on issues that matter to them, not on constitutional division. People across Scotland rightly want and expect to see both their governments and the United Kingdom and the Scottish Government working together with the relentless focus on the issues that matter to them, their families and their communities. The Prime Minister has been very clear and has demonstrated since day one